What if I told you that one act of crime could wipe out an entire farming community, devastate the nation's food supply, and cost millions of dollars in damages? Sounds unbelievable, right? But in a shocking twist of fate, such an event didn't just occur. It changed the course of American agriculture and left an indelible scar on the industry. This wasn't just an isolated case of vandalism or petty theft. This was something far more sinister, an attack that targeted the very lifeblood of the country, its farms. The consequences were so widespread, the damage so profound, it would be felt for generations. The backbone of America, agriculture under siege. Throughout history, agriculture has been America's backbone. It has fueled our economy, shaped our communities, and fed millions of people, both domestically and around the world. The vast farmlands that stretch across the country have been symbols of prosperity and growth. But when that foundation is shaken, the entire structure is at risk. For decades, farmers worked tirelessly to produce food that fed the nation. Whether it was corn, wheat, livestock, or dairy, the land was sacred, and the crops it produced were essential to the survival of countless families and businesses. Yet, beneath the surface of American agriculture, there were those who saw opportunity in chaos. While most were focused on harvesting their crops or tending to livestock, a group of individuals with malicious intent was plotting a devastating attack that would shake the agricultural sector to its core. The worst agricultural crime in U.S. history, the scheme unfolds. Today, we delve into the chilling tale of the worst agricultural crime in U.S. history. It wasn't just one crime, but a series of deliberate, coordinated acts of destruction. A single crime wouldn't have been enough to carry out the massive damage. No, this was an orchestrated campaign of sabotage designed to bring down an entire industry. Who was behind it? Why did they do it? How did this dark chapter unfold in one of the most productive farming regions in the world? The calm before the storm, a nation dependent on agriculture. It all began in the early 20th century, a time when America's agricultural sector was thriving. The country's prosperity was rooted in its fertile farmlands, where crops grew bountifully and livestock grazed freely. For farmers, it was a season of growth and opportunity, but it was also a time fraught with risks. While the soil could yield great bounty, it could also be unpredictable, and the success of a year's crop depended on the whims of weather, market fluctuations, and a multitude of other external forces. Farmers had come to rely on their ability to predict and adapt, using knowledge passed down through generations. Agriculture had become not just a job, but a way of life, deeply connected to the land and the cycles of nature. But in this tranquil scene, a storm was brewing, one that would destroy everything in its path. The attack, a calculated and deadly plot. This was no ordinary crime. What started as small, seemingly isolated incidents soon morphed into a widespread, devastating campaign. First, the farm equipment was targeted. Tractors were mysteriously set on fire in the middle of the night, destroying valuable machinery that farmers depended on. Then, the grain silos, the very storage facilities that were meant to hold the season's bounty, were blown up in a series of coordinated explosions. But the attacks didn't stop there. Soon, livestock was poisoned. Cattle and chickens died in droves, and entire herds were wiped out. Farmers, who had already invested months of work into raising their animals, found their efforts destroyed overnight. The sabotage hit on multiple fronts: equipment, crops, livestock, leaving no part of the farming operations safe. The attacks were strategically planned and executed with military precision. They were aimed not just at ruining individual farms, but at destabilizing the entire agricultural industry. The psychological toll on farmers was immense. What could have been the motive behind such ruthless destruction? The hidden forces, who was behind it and why? At first, it seemed like random, senseless violence. But as the attacks continued, patterns began to emerge. This was no ordinary crime wave. It became clear that someone or something was pulling the strings. Was it an act of disgruntled workers, or was there something deeper at play? The truth was even more alarming. Some believe the masterminds behind these attacks were individuals tied to powerful industrial corporations looking to control the food supply for their own gain. Others speculate that it was about controlling the land, forcing farmers into bankruptcy and taking ownership of their property. Whatever the true motive was, one thing became clear. This wasn't just an act of random violence. It was a deliberate attempt to manipulate the agricultural market, to create fear, and to destroy a system that millions of Americans depended on. The destruction, the nation's food supply on the edge. As the attack spread, the national food supply began to unravel. With crops destroyed and livestock poisoned, entire communities were left without a means to earn a living. Rural economies were hit hard, and local businesses that relied on farming for their survival faced financial ruin. The devastating loss of farm equipment meant that even those farms that survived the attacks couldn't continue their operations. The damage wasn't confined to the farming communities alone. With food shortages on the horizon, prices began to soar. The cost of grain, meat, and dairy skyrocketed, and it wasn't just the farmers who suffered. Consumers felt the impact, with higher grocery bills, food rationing, and an uncertain future looming over them. The effects of the crime were felt far beyond the fields. With agriculture in ruins, entire industries that depended on the farm sector were left scrambling to adjust. The nation's economy, which had relied so heavily on agriculture, suddenly found itself in turmoil. The ripple effects of the sabotage reached all corners of society. The ripple effect: how the attacks shattered communities. Rural communities, which had once been thriving, began to collapse under the weight of the devastation. Entire towns were built around farming, and with the destruction of local agriculture, those communities faced economic ruin. Thousands of families lost their homes, their livelihoods, and their sense of security. Many farmers faced bankruptcy. For them, the loss of crops, livestock, and equipment wasn't just a financial blow, it was a personal one. It meant the destruction of years, even decades, of hard work. For those who had inherited their farms from previous generations, the emotional toll was just as significant as the financial one. Rural America, which had long been the heart of the country's food production, suddenly felt like a hollow shell of its former self. The attacks weren't just about property and profit. They were about community, heritage, and the very soul of farming. The aftermath: a long road to recovery. Rebuilding after such a devastating crime was no small feat. Communities had to come together, not only to recover their lost land, but also to rebuild their sense of hope. While many farmers lost their land to the crisis, others managed to survive, albeit in a vastly changed world. Federal aid programs were set up to assist struggling farmers, and insurance policies, which had once been seen as a safety net, became more important than ever. However, even with these efforts, the scars of the sabotage would last for decades. Entire families were displaced, businesses closed, and many towns were forced to rebuild from the ground up. A lasting legacy: the ongoing vulnerability of American agriculture. Though many of the farmers involved in this crisis eventually rebuilt their lives, the scars of the event are still felt today. The agricultural industry learned valuable lessons from this experience. Farmers have since become more vigilant about protecting their land and assets, with increased security measures and stronger ties within the farming community. However, the legacy of the crime continues to haunt the farming world. The attack exposed just how vulnerable agriculture could be, how quickly the nation's food supply could be undermined by a few coordinated acts of sabotage. Conclusion: reflecting on the past and moving forward. Today, agriculture is still the cornerstone of the American economy. Farmers continue to face many challenges: climate change, trade disputes, and market volatility. But the memory of that devastating attack serves as a constant reminder of how fragile the system can be. Next time you sit down to a meal, think about the unseen forces that keep our food supply secure and the stories that shaped it. The struggles of our farmers don't end with a single crisis. They continue every day in the fields, through the weather, through market challenges, and through an ever-changing world. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history. If this story has impacted you, please like, share, and subscribe for more tales that uncover the hidden truths behind the industries that shape our lives. And as you go about your day, take a moment to appreciate the resilience of the farmers who make it all possible.